Hi guys. Okay, so I have to let me put the mute on here. Okay, you can see I'm doing this in a hurry. This I don't know. I just needed to talk about something real quick. I've got a little time this afternoon, so it's okay with me if a lot of people show up. If nobody shows up, it's not a big deal. You can get around to watching it, but it's a valuable subject. So I've talked about it before. Those of you who have followed me are familiar with me talking about critical thinking, and you will hear me use the phrase emotional agendas. And so it's important. This is something that I don't know, I'd like to say this is probably the most important thing. You know, if you follow my path, one of the first things that I will say is if your first step is, if you want to get anywhere in my path, and in my estimation, if you want to get anywhere in life, you have got to first drop all fear-based belief systems. And a lot of people will ask, well, what's a fear-based belief system? And that's actually a great question. And the reason why it's a great question is because whether that person knows it or not, they're asking me to help them with their critical thinking. And whether they realize it or not, they are admitting that there's a possibility that they may have a hole in their critical thinking. They might have a blind spot. Now, we are human beings. And so human beings are very faulty in their ability to see things objectively. In fact, there's somebody in my personal group that I hang out with, and I'll say, you know, see things objectively, and she'll immediately say, nobody sees anything objectively. You can never see things objectively. There's some truth to that. What she's saying is that it's impossible not to see things and react from an emotional place. And you see that, you know, I tend to go, when we do the Q&As, I do tend to go pretty hard at people who tend to present themselves as not having any emotions. That I am peace and I don't have any problems, and you heard me go off on somebody who said that they thought desire was evil, and I laid into that person kindly, but said, hey, listen, you know, you have desires. It's impossible not to have desires. The desire to be without desires is an attempt to escape your feelings. And so this is important. I guess let me start with this. Here's the premise of what I want to say. Everything we do in life is based on a desire to feel good. Now, people do things that on the surface don't sound like it feels good. They may be in situations, let's say somebody chooses to be in an abusive relationship. Now, from my perspective, none of that sounds like a good idea, nor does it sound like it would feel good. But because I know, this is again, everything starts with an assumption, and I have an assumption which I believe is true, which is that everything everybody does is based on a desire to feel good. And whether or not they have a rational understanding of what would actually make them feel good, that's a whole other issue. So let's say let's say a woman wants to be in a dysfunctional relationship with a man who beats her. From my perspective, I can't imagine why she would want to do that. But I know it happens. Not only do I know it happens, I know that there are a lot of situations where, you know, the cops will put the guy in jail. And then the person, you know, if she says, well, you know, he was really abusive and I'm scared, and now they have an opportunity to go to, you know, some kind of safe place. And they choose to drop the charges and let the guy back in. So there has to be some payoff for them or they wouldn't do it. Now, in their minds, if we psychoanalyze them, we will probably find out there's something having to do with childhood and maybe some abuse in childhood, and that she got the idea that, you know, daddy beat me, so to have love means to be beaten by a man, you know, those kinds of things. And then when they can become conscious of that and say, wow, that is a really messed up belief system I've been carrying around, no wonder I keep attracting these kind of guys, then they can change their assumption about the world, they can change their beliefs, and with a lot of hard work, they're going to have to look at some painful things and make some progress. That's an extreme example. So it's extremely important, if you want to make progress, not only in spirituality, especially in my path, but just in life in general, you have to employ what is called critical thinking. So I want to just give you a brief definition of critical thinking. You can go look it up. And by the way, a lot of people who teach critical thinking aren't critical thinkers. They have an intellectual understanding, but they don't have emotional critical thinking. And that's what I'm going to get to. Emotional critical thinking. It's absolutely essential. Critical thinking says that you, first off, you understand that human beings are flawed in their thinking process, that human beings make decisions and make beliefs based on emotions and all kinds of other things like that. And that our emotional reality is not always rational. We are emotional beings at our core. I am an emotional being. I teach critical thinking, but I'm not here to tell you to be, like Mr. Spock and be without emotions. I'm here to tell you you have to have your emotions. In fact, you cannot be a critical thinker if you're not able to feel and identify and verbalize your emotions. We'll get into that. So, critical thinking says that human beings are flawed and that they have the potential to make beliefs and take actions and make judgments upon the world based on their emotional state of being. And that a critical thinker knows this about themselves and is able and willing to analyze what their emotional beliefs and their emotional payoffs are at any given moment. There are certain questions that you ask. Let's say somebody says, I'm going to give you an example because this is going to be connected to, I'm going to give an example of somebody who left a comment on my channel, and we got into a discussion, and I thought, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and talk about this. So here's a statement. Eating animals is morally wrong. Okay, remember I say everything starts with an assumption. So this is the assumption this person has. That assumption is now going to color every single belief and statement and response that they say. Now, if that person is able to say, yes, that is my emotional agenda. I have an emotional agenda to protect the lives of animals. I believe it is wrong to eat animals, and therefore I am going to espouse and proselytize this belief. Agree with them, don't agree with them. I can't assault them on their critical thinking at that point because they're aware of what they believe and why they believe it. Now, but this is the problem with religions. God said, these kinds of things. But it is incredibly important to understand what your emotional agendas are. Now, most people, in my experience, do not even have an awareness that they have an emotional agenda at all. And in fact, this person responded when I said, you're operating from an emotional agenda, which is hampering your ability to not only give complete facts about what you want to talk about, it's also making you biased, and it's making you condescending and judgmental towards all these people that you say you want to help. In fact, let me just go ahead and read it. Let me just go ahead and read it. So I'll use this as an example so you know what I'm talking about. So let me see. Here it is. All right, let me see if I can find the comment here. Okay, this is the Harry's Family Live. So I don't know if it's one person or multiple people. So first thing is, I agree with, let's see, it was the 5 steps to control the matrix was my video. So I don't know if it was a she, but it feels like a she. She responded, I agree with a lot of what you're saying, but am shocked that you still eat meat. So right there's a judgment. Right off the bat, there's a judgment there. She's making distance between her and me, or him and me, with this judgment. I'm already on the defensive. So right now, if this person's intention is to create dialogue and to get people to think, because they believe that there's nothing wrong with this, because they believe that they understand something that will be helpful, then you have to address people and allow them to be where they're at. To be shocked about, that puts me on the defensive. Right, my only response at this point is to either defend myself or to succumb to your superior understanding, and please tell me why you're so shocked. So it already puts her at a disadvantage because she's not able to then communicate with me in a critical fashion. Okay? So first, now, okay, the other thing that critical thinkers do is when we talk about absolutes, when people talk, I do talk a lot in absolutes. I will be clear about that, especially when we're talking about Abrahamic religions. I really come down with, but I will tell you, I am absolutely aware that I have an emotional agenda about that. My emotional agenda is that I believe very strongly that the Abrahamic religions are extremely destructive. And I can elucidate my point. I've written books about it. But a lot of times when you have people who are not critical thinkers, they will throw out blanket black and white statements. And they won't be able to back it up. So here's one. You don't lose protein when you stop eating meat. What does that mean? What does that mean? You don't lose protein when you stop eating meat. For example, there is more protein in half a tin of baked beans than steak. Well, that statistic, you'd have to prove that to me. I have a hard time believing that. Listen, I enjoy beans. I know that they have protein, but I have a hard time believing that. So this, again, is the sign of somebody who has an emotional agenda. Because when you have an emotional agenda, one of the things you tend to do is you tend to exaggerate, you tend to use blanket statements, and you tend to put the other person on the defensive so that either they have to accept what you say or they have to defend themselves or prove you wrong, and then it becomes an argument, right? Which this is what happened here. So anyway, I won't go. I can see that you are open-minded, meaning that I'm going to be open-minded to the truth this person has to tell me. And then she puts a video. The following YouTube video does not preach. She just spent a few moments preaching at me. But her video that she has spammed onto my channel, bear in mind, I didn't go to her channel and say, can you tell me your views on veganism? This person came onto my channel, dumped their opinion, and then dumped a video for me to watch. Now, I normally just delete them, but anyway, I had nothing better to do at this moment, so I thought I would engage. It merely tells you what is going on with the connection between eating meat, health, the government, and drug companies. Okay, that's great. Remember, you have been brainwashed. So now she's making a judgment. She doesn't know anything about me. She assumes I am brainwashed. I'm once again on the defensive. So this clearly is somebody who has an emotional agenda. Now, I'm going to stop psychoanalyzing every word she says. What's important to understand is that it's okay to have emotional agendas. In fact, it is impossible not to have emotional agendas. The problem comes in when people say they don't. So I won't get into this. Truth. By the way, when people leave comments, if they're big long comments, I'll skim through what's important. I'm not going to spend my time reading your entire diatribe on whatever it is. And also, please don't put videos. Don't spam video links on my. That's just if I want you to give me a link, I'll ask for it. All right. So we went back and forth a little bit. And I said, first off, I do not eat steak, nor do I eat red meat, nor do I eat dairy, nor do I eat eggs. Please pay more attention to what I say. Second, I do not accept much of your statistics. Third, I get much of my protein from organic pea powder, and then I go on and on and on. And then I basically make the argument that, listen, you obviously have an emotional agenda here because you're not giving complete truths. Because while it is true that there are a lot of problems with getting your meat that it's been processed in the U.S., all the stuff, the chemicals, all the stuff that's in there, and all the meat companies and the drug companies, all that stuff is true. That's only half of the truth. The other half is that there's a whole other world out there of organic farmers and organic meat providers. And there are ways, if people choose to eat meat, there are ways to get meat without all of that. But this person doesn't provide that. Why? Because they have an emotional agenda to protect animals. Now, I could get into the psychology about why she identifies with that and does she project, herself onto animals and all that, but that's neither here nor there. Bottom line is, I said at some point, you have an emotional agenda. It is skewing your ability to make your argument, and you're not being truthful. And then I said, and then I made the presumptive a session that turned out to be true, which was that that she's being condescending and judgmental. And she responded. And I'm not going to get into all of it, but let's see if I can find. Okay, here she says, please only disagree with my stats once you've watched her video. There's an assumption that all of the facts in that video. I don't know what the emotional agenda is behind the person who made the video. I make videos, I have emotional agendas behind them. But again, there's the assumption that if I watch her video is true, and if I watch her video, I'll know the truth, and therefore I'll be convinced to her side of the argument. All right. So I didn't respond, and I said, oh, and she says, chickens have consciousness. Is it morally wrong to eat something that is killed and feels pain while other chickens in the queue watch to see their same fate? So that's a straw man argument. She answers her question within the question. She's not asking, is it wrong? She is saying it's wrong, and here's why. So again, that kind of duplicitous, condescending, that's a sign of an emotional agenda. All right, so I say, you're still making a lot of assumptions about how I choose my food. You're not being honest about your reasons for proselytizing, and I make the argument that I've already said here. So I say, please be honest and upfront. Then you will have my respect. And like others, if I want to learn your morality about eating animals, I'll ask, right? So she says, why would I spam something? I do not have an agenda, right? Now, here's the thing. Here's the clincher here. She repeats herself again. I really do not have an agenda. I literally just Googled the word as I thought it applied a sinister secret goal. You may consider my need to save a life an agenda if you wish. Anyway, blah, blah, blah. So, and then she accuses me of being argumentative. She came onto my channel, and spammed and trolled and did whatever, and she's accusing me of being argumentative, which I am. I did choose to be argumentative there. So, let's talk about emotional agendas. You cannot be a human being and not have an emotional agenda. Denial. You hear me go about this a lot. You hear me attack denial. It's extremely important to be able to identify your emotions and not deny them. As I've said, if you remember from the beginning, what I was saying is that this is my assumption. So you can choose to accept it or not, but everything I'm saying is based on this assumption. That everything that we do is based on a desire to feel good. Now, it makes this person feel good to protect animals. I am not arguing that. If this person had addressed me and said, for me, my experience with going vegan, I found, and they shared their experience, I would listen with an open mind. But when you have an emotional, an unconscious, let me be clear about that. There's a difference between having an emotional agenda and having an unconscious emotional agenda. An unconscious emotional agenda is when you say, I really don't have an agenda. Yes, you do. And I'm not fighting your agenda. In this case, you have an agenda to save conscious beings. Chickens are conscious beings, and she made that argument. I think it's a she or he. Made the argument about chickens having consciousness and how horrific it must be for those other chickens in the line getting ready to die. Watch the other, she's making an argument. And if she had said, for me, the thought of that is really horrible and I want to prevent it, I would have nothing to say. I would not argue because she's sharing her experience and she would say, this is why I'm so passionate about, I would have nothing to say. But at some point she said to me, deep, deep down inside that eating meat is wrong, right? So and then I said, you're being very condescending and judgmental. You sound just like a Christian. You now know how I feel. Now, if she had said that she feels deep, deep down inside that she realized that for her it was wrong, I would listen with an open mind. Because then somebody who talks like that is aware that they have an emotional agenda and that they are aware that that is their emotional agenda. And then they're going to explain why this happens for them. But people who have unconscious emotional agendas are people who go around telling other people how they need to live. And this is where religion comes in. Religion will say, You know, it's wrong to do this and wrong to do that, and if you don't do this and you don't do that, you know. And it's important to understand that we all have them. And if we don't address them and we don't acknowledge our agenda, not only are we not able to communicate effectively to others, but we're not able to do what it is that our agenda may very well need us to do. So let me talk hypothetically. First off, you know, from an objective standpoint, in my experience, having looked at human beings have evolved to eat other animals. We can debate whether or not that's the right thing to do. We can even debate whether or not that is or should be the fate of human beings. And then we can start a discussion about, should we start energetically creating a new evolutionary timeline for human beings, which means that we no longer consume animal flesh. That is a discussion I would be very interested in having. For me personally, I don't feel right if I don't eat some kind of animal protein, even if it's just fish or, you know, shrimp or something. I've got to have some kind of animal protein or I don't feel good. That's my personal experience. The studies that I've done in it is that that there are enzymes and vitamins that human beings are unable to get out of purely just plants alone. Eventually, at some point, you have to get these enzymes and these vitamins in some way. And the easiest way to do that is with animal flesh. Now, we could start talking about, like gorillas, for example. People have made this argument and said, you know, you can be a vegetarian and still be a weightlifter and all that and be strong. Because my body type is that it's not, my body is not happy if I'm not muscular. And so in order to keep, you know, the muscles on my body the way my body wants it, I have to eat a ton of protein. In order to do that, even if I do eat things like chicken and fish, I still have to supplement with a lot of protein shakes. And for that, I use pea protein because I don't like dairy. I don't like dairy, and I don't like, you know. So I like pea protein, and I'll have, you know, 3 or 4 pea protein shakes with 30 grams of protein in it, you know. And that makes me, and I sleep better. I feel better, so I know from personal experience that's what makes my body better. But I also know there's a lot of people out there with completely different body types who barely have to eat any, and a lot of them become vegetarians because they just don't like it. And then there are people who become vegans and vegetarians because they have an emotional agenda. It causes them pain, the thought of eating animals, right? So people have said, see, gorillas have all kinds of muscles on them and they don't eat any protein, animal protein. That's true. But they have to eat something like 40 pounds, 40 pounds of vegetables. And if you've noticed, gorillas, even if they don't have an ounce of fat on them, they got these big bellies that stick out. They have these distended bellies. That's because they have a digestive system that is designed to process all of that plant material and get all of the nutrients out of it. We're not able to do it. Human beings don't have it. That's why we eat other animals, because they can get it out of the plants and we can't. So we have to supplement it with, you know, fish, or, you know, if you don't want to eat chickens, don't eat chickens. You don't want to eat fish, eat shrimp. You don't want to eat shrimp, you know, I don't know. There are other things you can do to get that kind of protein. So anyway, that's a whole other discussion. But the point I want to make here, again, and I don't know that I'm doing it. I'm trying to rush through this because I do have some stuff I got to do later on. But it's so important. In order to be able to make, in my belief, to be able to make proper and constructive choices about not only your life, not only relationships, but especially your spiritual path, you have to be able to look at your emotional agendas. And anybody who says, I don't have an emotional agenda, is at the very least uneducated about the concept of critical thinking, and at worst is in outright denial. And when you are in denial of your emotions, that is when the biggest destruction happens. So I want to be clear about this. I've shared about it again, and I want to clarify it again because it's really important. It's really important to be willing to look at your painful feelings. It's really important to look at your sadness, your anger, your fears. That's why I say the first thing you need to do is drop all fear-based belief systems. Somebody coming at me and telling me that I know that it's wrong to eat meat, and then they could elaborate and say it's morally wrong and spiritually wrong, and then we could take the tactic that a lot of religions take and a lot of the fear-based religions take, which is if you eat meat, you will not achieve enlightenment. That's a fear-based belief system. And I don't believe that. I don't believe the universe works that way. If the universe worked that way, human beings would come out of the womb and be evolved not to eat other animals, and we're not yet. But it's also, you know, if I can say it's an interesting concept to think about the possibility that perhaps veganism and vegetarianism is the first rumblings of human beings beginning to evolve in a new direction. Because what will happen for the human race to survive? What will happen, let's say, if all animal-based protein were to disappear off the face of the planet? Now, there's a possibility that the human race could go extinct, but I don't think that's likely. I think what would happen is that a lot of people would die from things like anemia and all kinds of other things, or they have shortened lifespans. And then the human body would do what other animals have done, what clearly gorillas have done, because chimpanzees, by the way, eat meat. I don't know if you know that or not. But they do. They hunt down and they eat, you know, they sometimes even eat other chimps. We didn't know that for a long time, but now we know that. They hunt and they eat meat. Gorillas don't, as far as I know. But they have a completely different body structure, and they have the ability to do that. But perhaps veganism and vegetarianism is the first rumblings, and if all plant-based protein, or excuse me, if animal-based protein was taken off the face of the earth, human beings, you know, would begin to evolve. This is how evolution takes place. When there's a need, you know, you have constantly these aberrations in the DNA, and somebody would be born with some, you know, some DNA strand that was altered in such a way which allowed them to get the necessary proteins without having to eat meat of some kind. By the way, I know other people that I've known who were vegans and vegetarians for decades, and they end up having to become pescatarians because they were becoming anemic. So I personally don't have an agenda. You know, I totally relate to the idea, the thought of, you know, I believe that chickens have consciousness and awareness, and the thought of poor chickens standing in line and watching other chickens get killed, that doesn't make me all that happy. And so if somebody could come to me and say, here's a way that you can get all of the protein that you need and all of the vitamins and the minerals that you need without ever having to touch anything connected to an animal, I'd be way open to it. I've investigated and I haven't seen it. So I'm trying to give you that this is an example of me trying to be a critical thinker. Because let's go back to critical thinking again. Critical thinking says that every belief that is thrown out has an assumption. Everything starts from an assumption. If the assumption is faulty, everything that you say beyond that is then going to be tainted and will be at best inaccurate. So that's when if I'm looking at, I used this the other day, I forget what it was. Oh, I was talking about Western astrology. And I was saying that Vedic astrology was more accurate. Now, you didn't say that Vedic astrology is better or superior. I said Vedic astrology is more accurate. I didn't say that Western astrology was wrong or bad. I said that Western astrology was an inaccurate science because it starts from an assumption that is faulty, meaning that the tropical zodiac is an accurate reflection of the night sky. It's not. It's off by 24 degrees. So it's inaccurate. So if you believe that, if you have the assumption that astrology is a valid science and you're a Western astrologer, you are operating from a faulty assumption and you're going to get inaccurate results at best. That's what I'm talking about, critical thinking. So critical thinking says that every statement or belief starts with an assumption. that most likely those beliefs or assumptions have an emotional agenda. That's neither here nor there. But when somebody comes to you and says A plus B equals C, or let's just start with that one. The first thing is, if you have to ask yourself, is what this person's saying, is it true or false? You know, is it 100% true or is it 100% false? Most things will not fall into that category. So the information this person was giving to me, they were giving me skewed information, and they were controlling the kind of information that they were giving so that they could say, see, what I'm saying is true because of this. Here's this example. Here's my movie. Watch this. So most things are never usually 100% true or false. So then you have to ask yourself, of what this person is saying, what is partially true and what is partially false? And that's what I addressed with this person. I said that the information you're giving is not complete. You're not giving complete information. A and B is true, but C and D is not necessarily true. In other words, yeah, there's a lot of problems with the way we process meat and all the stuff that happens, and there's a lot of really unhealthy stuff out there. But you also, if you want to be truthful, then you have to say, but there are people who provide organic meat and you know, grain-fed and blah blah blah, and we, you know, less destructive ways of killing animals in order. You have to give that side of the argument, otherwise you're giving a skewed, biased viewpoint. So that's the second thing. You have to ask yourself, when is it partially true and when is it partially false? Now there are other things. There's another question, which is, when is something sometimes true and sometimes false? For example, right now the sun is shining. So I could say, I live on Earth. The sun is shining all the time on the Earth. Well, that's true. Somewhere on the Earth, the sun is shining 24 hours a day. But it's not completely true. It's only partially true, because the other half of that is that half of the Earth is under darkness half the time. So when is something true or false? When is something partially true and partially false? And when is something sometimes true and sometimes false? These are the kinds of questions you have to ask. And if somebody is giving out information that is clearly skewed, and when you ask those questions it starts to fall apart, that is a clear sign that somebody has an emotional agenda. Because I know this person knows these things. They know that there's other things. And until you confront them with that, then you find out their true emotional agenda, which I didn't hear in the first part. The emotional agenda is that these poor chickens and these poor cows and these poor whatever are going through all this emotional turmoil, and it is morally wrong to kill conscious beings. That's their agenda. Now, if this person had come to me and said that, and said, I personally have a moral problem with the thought of animals being killed, and therefore I don't like to eat, and I don't believe people should, and on top of that, here's a bunch of other things. You know, all the stuff that's going on in the meat industry and the drug companies and all that kind of stuff. Then you have something to talk about. But anyway, I think I've kind of made my point there. Anyway, like I said, I just sort of needed to rant. I had some time. I thought I would do that. It is important. And so if you're following my channel and you hear me say things to people like, you're operating from an emotional agenda, I'm not doing that to judge you. I'm doing that to help you to ask yourself, what is my emotional agenda? Because when you can get to the source of your emotional agenda, if there's a wound there or a fear is huge when it comes to creating emotional agendas. Because again, we do everything based on the desire to feel good and to avoid pain. And if we're not aware of what that is, then we project onto the world our beliefs and our assumptions, and that's incredibly destructive. It's exactly what religion does. You know, and it could be 90% good, but that 10% that is fueled by emotional agendas is always destructive, in my opinion. That's my assumption. That's my experience also. Anyway, I'll check and see if there are any questions, but again, I just sort of needed to rant for a little bit. I do need to do some work here a little bit later, but let me see. That's not where I'm at. I'm over here somewhere. Okay. All right, so let's see if there are any questions. Plants have feelings too. Everything lives off the death of another. That's another good point. You know, if somebody is going to make the And I'm not saying it's a bad argument. Let me be clear. If somebody wants to make the argument that it is in the best interest of the human race to become vegans, and that's, then I will listen to that. But you also have to accept the reality, the fact that we, at this point in our evolution, human beings don't have that ability. If you can make that accession, that exception in your argument, then I know that we are now, talking in a critical fashion, and that you're not thrusting your emotional agenda on. But if you're going to make that argument that we shouldn't eat animals because they have feelings, then you have to acknowledge that plants have feelings as well. Now, that's not just me talking. I believe that because I've talked to trees, I've talked to plants, I've talked to rocks, I've talked to everything. But we know that from certain scientific experiments, that even if you're in the vicinity of a plant and you have the intention of, I'm going to cut that plant and eat it, the plant starts to flip out. I don't know if it's an emotional thing, but energetically they respond in ways, electrically there's, I don't know the exact experiment, but I believe it. So if you're going to make that assumption, then you have to stop eating plants too, because plants have feelings. And then we start getting into the which being has less feelings than the other and all that. And again, I'm even open to the possibility that all of that is an argument to say that at some point human beings would benefit from, see, did you hear what I said? I was very careful about what I said. I didn't say it's better or worse. I said that human beings could benefit from only getting their nourishment from life force energy in the air, which is what we say that perfected immortals do anyway. That when they get to a certain point, all they have to do is just simply breathe and meditate, and they get all of the nourishment that they need. That's a valid argument. But you're not going to get my respect unless you can own your emotional attachments and your emotional agendas to it all. Okay, let's see. Thank you, Emerson's Bike and Rum Shop, for your donation of $5 on Super Chat. I appreciate that. Question: please explain the role of our personal mantra and ritual in critical thinking and managing emotional agendas. What a great question. So, again, for those of you who are new, I am a Vedic astrologer, and I do offer a service where I will give you a mantra and a ritual completely aligned for you based on your astrology. In my experience, and in the experience of others, this is a mantra that is tuned vibrationally to you and will help you in all kinds of ways. I won't get into that because that's not what we're here to do. This is what she's asking about. So what is the role of personal mantra and ritual in critical thinking? Well, now we start getting into the shamanism of the three selves. The lower self, as you know, if you're not familiar with my work on this, please watch other videos about the three selves. The lower self is where we have the unconscious mind and the subconscious mind. In the unconscious mind, the word unconscious means you are not conscious of it. So let me give you an example. The person who said, I don't have any emotional agendas. First off, like I said, either they're very uneducated on what critical thinking is, or they're in denial, or perhaps both. If somebody says something to me and says, you are unconsciously angry about such and such, or you were this, or you were that, the truest thing I can say in response to them is that I am not consciously aware of that. But if I respond with, like, let's say somebody says, you're latent homosexual. Now, if somebody were to say that to me, I would say, well, I understand there is a spectrum. I have to be honest with you, I am not aware of that. To the best of my knowledge, I'm on the heterosexual side of the spectrum. But if you were to say that to me, and I would say, I would start cussing at you and yelling at you and saying, how dare you say that to me? There is no way. I have never, ever, ever. Then that's a big sign that somebody has an unconscious emotional agenda to protect that, meaning they're not aware of it consciously, but unconsciously it's still there. By the way, the universe holds you responsible for your unconscious agendas. It's not enough to say I wasn't conscious of it. Because in order for something to become unconscious, there was a deliberate choice. Again, little kids, 3, 4 years old, make deliberate choices on how to please their parents in order to survive. In order to, once that becomes a pattern, it goes into the unconscious, because the unconscious says, this is really important and I'm going to safeguard this for your protection. I don't want you to think about it. I want to hold on to it, and I'm going to make all these choices for you. You won't have to do it on a conscious level, so that, you know, I will take care of you. It's like a big giant bouncer who has said, I know what's best for you, and starts beating up your friends, you know, because it's decided that your friends are bad for you. That's what unconscious, this is why this is so important. This is why unconscious emotional agendas are so important, because if you're not aware of them, you can be causing yourself all kinds of self-sabotage, and you can be causing other people. In fact, I guarantee you, you are causing other people damage, but you're not aware of it. Okay, so the role of personal mantra and ritual. The personal mantra is designed to based on your chart and based on your the planet that needs to work with you and the deity and all that, and we talk about that. It goes into your unconscious mind and starts like a antivirus program on your computer. It starts looking for the faulty data in your unconscious mind, which are inaccurate beliefs, self-destructive beliefs, fear-based beliefs, all the things that aren't going to help you not only in life but in your personal evolution. And it starts taking them apart. What ends up happening is that your unconscious mind, because like I said, it's a bouncer trying to protect you, it then fights back. And it fights back in ways sometimes subtle, sometimes overt, to try and get you to stop doing your mantra. You get tired, you fall asleep, your car blows up on you, you get in a fight with your family member, you miss a payment on your something, and it doesn't matter what it is in your external life, that's your unconscious mind distracting you, so that you will not become aware of what your faulty belief system is. Because again, your unconscious mind thinks it's protecting you. It says, you don't need to know about this. I'll deal with this. I'll protect you. Okay? And if you get really extreme, that's when you end up with multiple personalities. Personalities that have secrets that keep things from the conscious mind in order to protect you. Anyway, that's a whole other subject. Managing emotional agendas. So that's what an emotional agenda is. So I'm going to make a psychological evaluation, which I am telling you may not be true. It's a generalized one, but this is my prediction. I don't know whatever her name was, the person who commented on my channel. I believe this is a very emotionally sensitive person. Somebody who cares a lot for other beings. I think that's generally the case. So they project onto animals their own emotional experience, which might be right. I love animals. I think animals absolutely have emotional lives. So I'm not against that. But they see themselves in that. Now, there has to be a victim mentality in it for this person to feel the need to proselytize with a movie and get other meat eaters to stop, because I think probably she feels it's harmful to her to know that other people are engaging in behavior that's harmful to animals, because she projects herself onto animals. Now, there's nothing wrong with that until you become conscious of it, and then you become aware that, wow, it's not in my best interest to try and proselytize people or judge them or condescend to them, because they're not going to be able to hear it. So that's what happens if somebody becomes conscious. If it's unconscious, now it could be even worse. This may have been somebody that could have been picked on as a little kid. This could have been somebody that was and otherwise feeling, like an animal in a cage, and, they could have been hurt and all kinds of other things, which I know nothing about. Those kinds of things could definitely set up a scenario for somebody to have an emotional agenda, to protect themselves, and then a belief system. All of a sudden, a belief system comes along and says, eating animals is wrong, and if you eat animals, you will not achieve enlightenment. Then somebody, their emotional agenda can say, now I have an excuse. It will latch onto it, and then it becomes, you go around the world preaching, and then you limit your information. You don't give people information on how to actually get, organic, healthy meat products. You don't give that in your statement. You only focus on all the negatives that comes out of, how to eat, all the problems that are in the meat industry. That's a sure sign of an emotional agenda. Again, there's nothing wrong with having an emotional agenda as long as you know what it is. I have an emotional agenda when it comes to Abrahamic religions. I believe they are the most destructive thing that's ever reached this planet. And I share about that. I've written books about it. I am open to the idea that that may be an unresolved emotional agenda in my unconscious. Because I have to go, you know, why do I feel the need to write so many books about it and talk about it? So I'm not averse to the idea of that. But I can tell you what my emotional agenda is and why I have it. And so therefore, I think I'm better at helping other people who are like me want to escape that. And so I think that's why it's beneficial. So I know that wasn't really your entire question, but I asked it anyway. Gorillas eat insects as well, by the way. I did not know that. There you go. Even gorillas eat some kind of, if you want to call an insect an animal. Let's see. Looking for the questions. Thank you for the... Lindsay Rogers gives little green hearts. Thank you, Lindsay. Let's see. Again, looking for the questions. Question. Black Earth Productions asks, what do you think about the fires going on in California right now? Well, I'll be honest with you. It makes me really sad. And it's hard to talk about. I mean, I'm not going to break down and cry, but it's hard to talk about because... You know, it seems pretty clear that we have a global warming situation. You know, again, a global warming is another good example of emotional agendas. There's a whole move out there to say that global warming is that the theory of global warming is a what's the word I'm looking for? Is you know, it's a false belief, and I forget my word. What is it that I go against? Anyway, but it seems pretty clear that global warming is real, and I think this is a direct result of that. It makes me sad because I don't think that if things continue that we're going to get a lot of our natural ecosystem back. I lived in Idaho for 10 years, and I didn't believe, I wasn't against the idea of global warming because I had lived by the beach. And when you live by the beach, you know, the temperature is the same. Like right now it's it's December whatever, 4th or 5th, and I just was walking out there, you know, with my shirt off and my shorts, and it was, you know, it's kind of chilly, but the sun is warm. But I mean, I can't do that if I lived up in Maine. It would just be way too cold. But when I moved to Idaho, where there's supposed to be these changes in seasons, we saw major problems with the change in temperature and heat waves that would spark fire situations and entire forests, and that were burned away. And the time that I lived there, through those 10 years, I watched, I don't know how many thousands of acres of forest be burned up. That may never come back. And it became clear to me that I was watching the change of an ecosystem. That, you know, even part of the reason that fires would happen is because the temperature in the winter wouldn't get cold enough to kill the bugs. And so there are bugs that are designed to go and find weak trees and eat them and destroy them. Now, under normal circumstances, this is a good thing because it keeps the trees healthy. But when there's a drought like this and it gets really hot, then the bugs start going crazy and they start attacking, you know, trees that are only maybe minimally weakened, and then they just destroy whole forests of trees. And then that's nature changing an ecosystem. That's saying this is no longer cold enough to support these kinds of trees, and we're going to make this now a scrub brush area, more of a deserty area. And when that happens, you're seeing, and it happens every single year in every single forest, that's really clear sign that things are going to change. And for me, that's sad because I love the forest, and you know, I hate to see that. But what saddens me more is the conspiracy. That's the word I was looking for. The conspiracy, I would say, of the you know, the gas and oil companies, the conspiracy to keep this information away. Because if we honestly knew, if people honestly knew and believed that this was happening, we would say, let's stop using oil. So there's a lot of people who have the potential to lose money. I find it, you know, for me, I think that people who believe that global warming is a conspiracy, we've got people who have unconscious emotional agendas. And I could get into that. I'll give you one example. When I was in Idaho, and there was, you know, the movie An Inconvenient Truth came out, and there was a screening of it. There were born-again Christians outside protesting the movie. And I asked one of them, very kindly, I said, so why do you have a problem with this movie? And they said, well, I don't like the theory of global warming. And I said, why? And they said, because it goes against the Bible. That's the only thing they could say. But here you have, you know, this goes into why I think, you know, the far right and the religious right are really doing a number on us, because you have a lot of people who are afraid, and all you have to do is introduce something like that it's against God, or that the government, this is a big one, the government is trying to hoodwink you by giving you this false propaganda, even though, you know, the scientific community is saying, yes, it's not a theory, it's a reality, right? And then you have to ask yourself, who benefits from that? Is there anybody that's benefiting from the global warming theory? Really? No. There is nothing that it's hurting everybody, that reality. Is there somebody benefiting from opposing that theory financially? Absolutely yes, without a doubt. Coal industry and the oil industry, without a doubt. So critical thinking says, who's benefiting from this? And the person who's going to benefit from suppressing information, you're going to be able to see a direct trail of how they're benefiting. There isn't a direct trail on scientists saying, listen, global warming is destroying our ecosystem in a lot of ways. There just isn't. There is a definite money trail. You can follow the money trail to see how people benefit by trying to take over our government and change our governmental policies in order to protect the logging companies and the oil companies. You can see it. Critical thinking says don't get your emotions involved. If you have an emotional agenda to protect it because you have a right, or you have an emotional agenda to protect it because your family's a coal miner, or you have an emotional, then you can't see things objectively. This is another good example. All right. So I don't know if I answered your question a lot. I probably pissed off a lot of people. Maybe I lost some subscriptions, but whatever. Question. Greetings, Michael. The DVDs that you recommend and sell, Gayatri Mantra and Celestial Qigong, do they work well to synergize and safely, smoothly develop Qi and Kundalini? The answer is yes. Otherwise, I wouldn't sell them. That is my belief. I think they're very beneficial. There are a lot of things that I know which are very dangerous and very powerful that you can only teach to students that you work with, and I don't teach those things on video. So the stuff that I teach on video, in my experience and my belief, will be helpful to anybody, and that's why I teach them. Because they're safe. You can make mistakes. You know, some things, if you make a mistake, you can really blow out circuits. But, you know, you can make mistakes. You don't have to be perfect. I was talking with somebody about that yesterday. You know, do your best and just have fun and enjoy it. You don't. Otherwise, if you really want to learn high-level stuff, you got to work with me in person. And right now, I'm not doing that with anybody. All right, so looking for the questions queue. So it's helpful if you write out question or question mark. Otherwise, I might miss your question there. William Hopkins, do you think these people are actually going against their cause unconsciously, similar to the new feminist movement? Well, you've just made an assumption, which I don't know is true because I don't know enough about it. You've made an assumption that the feminist movement is working against feminism, I'm assuming. I don't know that to be true. I would love to look into that and see if that's true or not. But do these people, are they going against their cause unconsciously? Well, yeah, because, again, if their intent is to try and help people understand the damaging effects to themselves spiritually and physically by eating meat, whether that's processed or otherwise, then, you know, from the get-go, you have got to present that information in a way that people can hear it. Now, this person, the first thing that they said, the first thing out of this person's mouth was, I agree with a lot of what you are saying, but I am shocked that you still eat meat. And then she goes on to say, you know deep down inside that this is wrong. And then she gives these straw man arguments. This is clearly somebody who has an agenda to give her side and not give you all the information. Because if you get some of the information, you won't get what she's really interested in, which isn't so much about the problems of, you know, the tainted meat and all that. Her real interest is that she has an emotional agenda to protect animals. She feels that animals are being slaughtered and it's harmful to them. That is an argument worth talking about. But she's not being honest. She's not being straightforward. She's couching it in all these other straw man arguments and all these judgments. She makes judgments throughout her thing. She makes judgments about me. And I can feel the condescension. I can tell that she's, you know, putting a smile on her face as she does it. Has no idea how destructive that is. So to answer your question, absolutely. She's working against herself. I probably would be far more willing to, you know, like I said, when I was thinking about it, I was walking along the beach and I started thinking about it and I thought, you know what's an interesting subject is the thought of what can we do to change our DNA so that we can evolve into not needing to eat anything. That's a lot of fun. See, then you start talking with me like that, then you appeal to my emotional agendas, which is spiritual evolution. And then you can talk to me, but you can't do that if you're going to come from a condescending, judgmental place. And if somebody is condescending and judgmental, I already know they're in denial. This is my belief based on my experience, that they have an unconscious agenda. And they're in pain. And that will always, what's important about that is when you have unconscious, unresolved pain, you always cause other people harm. Even if you're coming to them with a smile on your face and say, here's some really good news. You're always harmful to other people. At some point, you're going to hurt them, and you're not going to even know you're doing it. And in fact, you may even defend how you hurt other people. That's why it's so important to be conscious. All right, so let me see if there are any other questions here. All right, looking for the question again. Questions. Wow, Cosmo Joe says that deers eat birds. Okay. I haven't heard that, but I have no reason to doubt that possibility, I suppose. All right, so somebody's trying to make, you know, I'm not going to point you out. You know who you are. You're trying to make some argument about carbon tax, and you're going to tell me there's a conspiracy. My friend, you're in denial. That's just my opinion. You're in denial. Chickens, Alicia says, my chickens eat mice and rabbits. Well, there you go. Chickens are not vegetarian. There you go. All right, I didn't know that. Somebody saw it with their own eyes. It's like these guys, okay, all right, I don't know what that is. Okay, Black Earth Productions, I completely agree. The Wizard's second rule. That didn't come from me, this is coming from him, so I'm assuming he has something that says the Wizard's second rule. Sometimes the greatest harm can come with the best intentions. Yeah, that's important. This is, you know, this is intentions. We have to get out of our selfishness in that, you know, lots of times when somebody has the best intentions, they can be feeling lots of love. They can be filled with loving feelings. They can be tearing up and crying as they act out of their unconscious agenda. I went through this with my ex-wife. This is one of the reasons why she's my ex-wife. You know, I would say to her, I think you're angry with me. You know, and we'd go into, you know, go into therapy, and I would say, I think she's angry with me about this and this. And she would say, I'm not aware of that. It's really important. Just because you have a feeling, that's narcissistic. It's narcissistic to just get caught up in how you're feeling at the moment. I'll give you an example in my life. Again, you all know that I lost my my fiance almost, I don't know, 8 weeks ago or something like that. And where I'm at now in my evolution is that I've come to accept, mostly, there's still part of me that doesn't, I've come to accept that I'm never going to see her again physically. I'm getting more comfortable with that. I'm getting more and more comfortable with the idea of, you know, someday again I may get into another relationship. I might even marry. But what pains me the most is the thought that she's somewhere where she can't feel how much I love her. And that when I talk to her and when I, but that's me. That's my need. I have a need. It would make me feel better to have the idea to think that she could feel that. That's my selfishness. That's my narcissism. So when you have this need and you're smiling and the Lord Jesus loves you, you just don't know how painful and how much sin you're in, and if you just knew, but God, I'll pray for you, the Lord loves you. You can be filled with all kinds of positive, loving emotions and have no awareness on how incredibly condescending and demeaning it is to say, you don't know any better because you're lost in sin, and I have the truth and you don't, and I know it's true because I feel so much love for you. The feelings that you have are great, but that doesn't mean that you're coming from awareness or from truth or anything else. That's why critical thinking is so important. Okay. All right, so let's go here. Cosmo Joe just ran into a clip of a deer eating a rabbit. I'm sorry for that rabbit. I don't know why I'm laughing, but I never knew that happened. I had no idea that happened in nature. Okay, so let's see, any more? All right, no more questions. So anyway, yeah, I just needed to rant. I think I've been on for a while now. I've been on for, an hour or so. I'm not going to rant anymore about this. I didn't do any, let me do some, nope, I don't have any ads here. All right, so for those of you new to my channel, you want an astrological reading, go to, let me see, I've got a little thing here, but it's missing a dot. It's astrology.thunderwizard.com, so just be aware of that. Let me see if I find where the ads are. Okay, so everything else in the ads are correct, except for that one. It's astrology.thunderwizard.com. So I'll be back in a minute, 20 seconds, and then I'll wrap this up. Okay, so what other things, other announcements? I am currently in the process of creating an apprenticeship program just for astrology, and here's my reasoning behind this. I am really happy with the success I'm getting with the astrology. I was hoping I could get rid of some other work and just focus on that. Getting a lot of astrology readings, which is great. Problem is, I'm not having as much time, free time, and so I'm having limited time to take other apprenticeships. So what I'm going to do is create an apprenticeship program for Vedic astrology, and what I'm going to do is I will teach you my method. And my method is I've got a very specific method, just to let you know. There are plenty of other places to learn Vedic astrology. Vedic astrology is a huge science. So I'm not here to say I'm going to make you a master astrologer and all these blah, blah, blah. This will definitely get you in and teach you the basics, and then you can branch out from there. But I'm going to show you exactly what I do, because in my readings, there are things that I give in my astrological readings that are very precise, that I created because I spent a lot of time, trying to study Vedic astrology, because I wanted to find rituals and mantras. I believe in them very strongly, and I wanted to find one that would really work for me. I'd done a lot, and some of them worked and some of them didn't, and I wanted to find out what the science was about that. I finally got in touch with an astrologer who had some knowledge about that, and he showed me some things. I've taken that even further. I go even more in depth, and I'm more precise than that guy was. And he's a master Vedic astrologer. So I'm going to show you what I do to create a reading, and then you can, if you want, take that information and go and start, charging and doing your own astrology readings for fun or for profit. And then I'm going to have a master phase of my kind of astrology. I'll come up with some name like power astrology or thunder astrology or something like that. And if you are able to pass some tests, I'll test you to see if you are able to give good and precise astrological readings according to my method and the ways that I do it. Then what I will do is I will farm out. I think that my astrology business is going to get even bigger, which means I'm going to need, I'm either going to need to stop taking other apprentices or I'm going to need help. So what I will do is, for those that follow that second phase and pass the test and get certified to work in my stead, when I have more astrology orders than I can handle, I'll farm them out to you guys. I'll take, I don't know, a small percentage and you can keep the rest. So I'm just letting you know that. If you want to be a part of that, I need you to email me at info@thundershamanism.com. Some people have a hard time spelling thunder shamanism, but do your best. If I'm on the phone with somebody, like I'm trying to get a phone or get an internet and say, what's your email? info@thundershamanism. Can you spell that back to me? info@thundesham. I don't know why shamanism is such a hard word to spell. info@thundershamanism.com. Let me know. In the title, say Astrology Apprentice, and I will put you in a special file. And when I'm ready to roll it out, you'll be the first people to get the information. But the other thing I want to promote with you, obviously everything else that I'm doing, if you want to learn shamanism, I'm talking about learning it from the ground up, learning the methods that I have learned, which again is I have learned from multiple sources, and I've brought everything together syncretic. I'm only interested in teaching you things that work. I'm not interested in giving you any kind of religious crap. So this will work with anybody from any spiritual or religious background, and I'll teach you the science of that. And I teach you from the very beginning how to build the thunder wheel, how to work with the 5 elements, how to work with the directions, how to deal with all the 9 levels and Qigong and shamanism and all that kind of stuff, the 3 selves meditation. So go to thunderwizard.com and sign up at the $25 level. You'll get access to all of the private videos on there. So that's it. I think there might be 1 slot left open right now for apprentices at the $108 level, which are people who get all that stuff, plus they work with me one-on-one once a month. And I think there are obviously other ones at higher levels. But as I said, I'm running out of time, and so hurry up before I decide that I don't have time to do it. So that's it. I think that's all for now. I'll double check to see if there's any last minute questions, and if not, we'll move on. Black Earth Productions question: can you speak upon the nature and consciousness of Fenrir in context to many of the earth changes we see happening via Ragnarok and the consciousness of Fenrir? I believe that I have spoken on that, but that is a great question. I'm stalling because I'm aware that this is a huge subject and I don't want to give out a blanket statement for something that I don't know. So let me tell you my thoughts as I have them right now. I believe that Fenrir, if you're not familiar with Norse mythology, Fenrir is a wolf. He is the son, I believe he's the son of Loki. And he was a wolf that as a pup was taken into Asgard, which is the realm of the celestial gods. He grew bigger and bigger and stronger and became so strong that everybody feared he would swallow up the universe. And so they endeavored to tie him up. The gods did. And it's a really wonderful myth. If you ever read it, go ahead. I've talked about it a lot. But the bottom line is that no matter how strong the chains, well, first they went to Fenrir and said, show us how strong you are. Can you break through this rope? And Fenrir had an ego. And he said, yes, I can. He broke through the rope. How about the chains? Yeah, I smashed through the chains. And then they came up with a thread that was so subtle that it was based on the magic of subtlety. And that's the only way that you could tie Fenrir up. Fenrir's not stupid. So when they came to him with this tiny thread and they said, I bet you can't break through this, he knew something was up. And so he said, all right, I don't trust you, but if one of you is willing to put your hand in my mouth, then you can tie me up. But if I can't break it off, I'm taking your mouth with me. So he made an assumption. You remember, assumptions get you into trouble. He made the assumption that none of them were willing to sacrifice their hand in order to tie him up. But the deity of Tiw, who is representative as a war god, which I don't think is accurate. I don't believe Tiw is a Mars god. I believe Tiw is more connected to Jupiter and especially the North Star. Tiw put his hand in there while the others bound him up because nobody else had the guts to do it. And sure enough, he couldn't break through the bond of subtlety because the thread was made up like the footfalls of kittens and the lips of chickens and things that don't exist, meaning subtlety. The question about that is that in order to master our unconscious, we have to have a subtle touch. This is why, again, people who methinks thou dost protest too much, people who are giving blanket statements and throwing out judgments and this and that, there's no subtlety there, that's Fenrir. Fenrir represents all of that negative stuff, the need, the fear, the unquenchable desire that will mean you'll destroy the whole universe trying to get what you want. What does that have to do with the earth changes via Ragnarok? Well, what I would say is that Fenris is working through the oil companies, because the oil companies, we have the technology. We have the technology to go completely green. We have it. We can do it. The argument is it'll cost too much money. But those same technologies will mean, just like having, when you get solar for your home, it means you're completely self-sufficient. You don't need to be connected to the grid. You can get your own electricity. The government doesn't want that. The government, by the way, when I use the word government, I'm talking about big business. I'm not talking about the elites. I'm talking about big business. The people who are in government, who, we could argue about who's the worst one. They are simply representatives of that, big business. But even that, big business, is a reflection of Fenris within us. Because if we weren't still attached to our fears and our desperate need, there would be no big business. Because we would choose that there wouldn't be any. So Fenris ultimately is us. We are responsible for all of that garbage out there. That has in mind the logging companies. I'll give you another example. Our ancestors, specifically my Germanic ancestors, there were people whose living was they'd go out in the forest and they'd chop down trees and they'd bring back wood because you needed wood. Everybody needed wood. Now these guys, before monotheism came along, they would see which trees were willing to be chopped down. And then they would make an offering to the tree, and they would carve into the tree a symbol which allowed the spirit of the tree to find a safe place to live. They believed that all trees had a spirit, and so you would ask for that. And there are people still today, if you don't get permission from the trees and you cut down the wrong tree, the spirit of that tree could curse you. Our ancestors believed the same thing. Now, fast forward to today, which society is it that has the least respect for trees? The descendants of the Germanic people, white people. And that's because of Fenrir. We bought into the fear of Christianity and monotheism when we gave up our understanding of the earth, And so now Fenris works through us and consumes and destroys nature in all kinds of ways. And, you know, everybody needs wood. I'm not saying that's not the issue, but I'm saying consciousness and awareness. We are Fenris. So if there is a Ragnarok, and Ragnarok is the result of Fenris being let loose, it's because of our unwillingness to listen to the ancestors and to follow the beliefs of our ancestors. And we did that all out of fear. We could get into that. That's a longer discussion. So I hope I answered your question there. Chris Davis asked a good question. If everyone agrees we need food to survive, what if everyone agreed that we don't need food? That's what I was saying earlier. That's a great discussion. What if we made the decision to decide to evolve into a different species? I don't know if I'd be able to choose not to eat food. I don't know if I have that ability, but maybe I need to open myself up to that. Maybe that's my limitation. All right, so let me see if there's any more questions. Here's a question again. If you guys put question in all caps, I can see it. Otherwise, I think it's just a comment and I may miss your question. Ben Real, can you give some brief insight as to how you interpret Betelgeuse using one's ruling star in a Vedic chart? I cannot give you insight because I don't do that. That is not part of my skill set. So sorry, I can't help you there. Let's see. Going for the, okay, no more questions. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap things up because I got other things I got to do. Again, I just had like a bug crawled up my ass, and I just sort of had to deal with that. And you know, lots of times like this, it turns into a good discussion, and I was afraid I was just going to be venting for no good reason. But anyway, there's that. So again, thunderwizard.com if you want to learn shamanism. That's the best way to support this channel. If you sign up as a $25 subscriber, not only will you get all the free videos, but you give me the ability to do exactly this. To have the time to go, you know what, I want to talk about this. And I come on and I talk about this or that or whatever. I want to be able to do that. I want my entire focus to be on this channel, on this teaching, and on my books. And I just want to be able to focus on that. I like giving Vedic astrological readings, but I don't want to be dependent upon anything. I want to be able to do what I want when I want to do it. And I'm happy to teach you how to do that as I go. So if you want to help me with that, go to thunderwizard.com, become a subscriber. And I already talked about the other stuff. info@thundershamanism.com if you want to become an astrology apprentice and learn how I do my astrology readings and perhaps make a living doing that as well. That's it for now, my friends. Thank you so much for the opportunity to come and brain fart all over you this afternoon. I got to get back to work. And again, I'll see you guys soon, and thanks a lot.